All right, let's go here. All right, so jQuery. Let's talk about jQuery today. So one of the things that, as I was presenting here, that we're going to be focusing on JavaScript and jQuery, is that the fact that we're going to be able to introduce programmatic development into our pages, right? Up to this point, we've been looking at HTML, CSS, right? All static content, right? That was downloaded from the server, and there was some logic, minimal logic with the media queries, right? That we were showing one style versus another depending on the size of the page, right? And we did see some movement on the page depending on that size, and things move around a little bit, right? But that was using declarative programming, right? We were declaring, saying that if these were the conditions, then this is what we wanted to happen, right? We were also doing declarations in the CSS, saying, providing some kind of rules, right? Some if-then kind of programming, saying that if the HTML match this particular pattern, then this is the style that we wanted to apply, right? So that in the CSS we would have rules saying pattern match this, the document, and then apply these styles if they match, correct? Right? So we want to go a little beyond that and use some still manipulate the DOM, right? That is our interest. Our interest is interact with the user. We have a user interface. We want to programmatically, react to their events, as they click and drag and do things with the UI. We want to be able to respond to those events, right? We also want to be able to dynamically manipulate the DOM as add new items, remove items, rearrange things around, right? We want to be able to be responsive. We certainly could do this on the server side, right? By perhaps clicking on the button and submitting the page with some event, recalculate the page on the server, and then come back with a resulting page. We could do that, right? And that's what we're going to do when we come back from spring break. But today we want to look at something that is a little more dynamic, a little more responsive, in that I want to have immediate feedback on what I'm doing, right? As I am interacting, I don't want the whole page to refresh or the entire page to reload or reevaluate. I might be interacting with only a table or a particular item here, right? And I would like to be able to delete or remove or rearrange things, and I want feedback immediately right on the browser without having to reload the entire page, right? So I want immediate feedback, and that's where JavaScript comes in, right? More and more we see applications that it is not acceptable to reload the entire page. We want immediate gratification. We want immediate feedback as we interact with the page, right? We want our web applications now to behave more like desktop applications, right? Desktop applications, you have the full control of the UI, right? And it behaves as if it were just talking to you, right? So it's a one-to-one development. It's very responsive, right? You get immediate response from the UI. So we want that kind of experience with our web applications as well. And so more and more our JavaScript and code is becoming more and more important on the front end. Make sense? All right. One problem of using so much JavaScript on the front end is that notice that we're here, right? We're developing this JavaScript here on the server side. We're the developers, right? We're here. We can't control the client, right? We can't control who is accessing our HTML or JavaScript, correct? It might be Chrome, might be Firefox, Safari, IE, God forbid. So in each one, each browser, there's slightly different versions. There's different vendors, right? And within each vendor, there's slightly different versions. And so the support for JavaScript standard is not consistent across all browsers, consistent across all vendors. Okay, and so you end up writing a lot of JavaScript that has a lot of logic in there that asks, asking what version of the browser am I looking at? What vendor am I looking at, right? And depending on the browser, you make decisions. Oh, well, you don't have this feature in this browser, so I'll do this, right? So you end up with a lot of if else, if else, if else, if else, a lot of switch statements in here, right? All over the place. Okay, and that's not fun at all. What jQuery does is that it comes in and saves us. It says, you know what? Instead of you having to code directly to the browser, right? Instead of doing that, I'm going to centralize all that logic of asking what browser it is or what version. I'm going to centralize that in an API, right? So that as you instead of you coding directly to the browser, you code to a JavaScript API, and that API will then have all that logic and figure out, right, on its own what it should do, right, to behave the way you're expected to behave. That makes sense, right? So it's seldom today that people just code in plain old JavaScript. I mean, obviously you can still do that, but more and more people use frameworks like Dojo or jQuery, and all these frameworks that abstract the browsers for you and make it standard across all browser vendors. That makes sense? All right. Okay. So we're not gonna code directly in JavaScript. I mean, we are a little bit, right? I mean, jQuery is JavaScript, right? You're coding but we're coding to that API. All right. So let's create just a dummy, a simple hello world JavaScript tiny application. So let me open a website. The essentials file. Let's see where it is. There it is. No. Okay, there it is. So for this course, let's say experiments. We'll create here add JavaScript. Okay. Let me just call it JS. And in there, I'm going to create my first experiment. And I'll call it 000 hello. All right, there we go. So this is hello world from JavaScript. So this is H1 hello world. Okay, there we go. Let's run that. There we go. So it says hello world, right? So to add scripts to these pages, we use the script tag. Okay, and in the script tag, you can add all sorts of logic, programs that execute right when the page loads. Right? It looks at the script tag, and anything in there, it'll execute it. Right? So, for instance, if I declare variables, right? I can use anything you would expect that you could do in a programming language. You can. You can also alert. Like use functions that are native to the JavaScript language, and say hello world, hello from JavaScript. I reload, and there it is. So it says alert, right? So that script is executing. Everything in that script gets evaluated, right? The variables get evaluated. They're given values, right? So we can say so that's hello world. We can say instead of alerting, we can instead write to the JavaScript console, right? So we can do console.log hello world from console, right? And the console is notice that it's not showing anywhere, right? You need to open up the console. There it is. This is a hello world from console, right? So on the right-hand side, remember we were looking at this a couple of days ago, and we were using it to explore the document. Yes, explore the HTML, explore the DOM. This is the DOM, right? This is the document object model. Right? This is the object representation of the browser having parsed our HTML. Yes, remember that you can look at the source, right? The source HTML. There it is, right? This is what got downloaded from the server, right? And if you go to the elements, it's the object representation of having parsed that. Yes, this is what it has in its memory, right? It has a hierarchical representation of which it has 2 nodes. Under that node, there's another node, H1 node, and whatnot. Yes, there's an object representation, right? If you put here bad HTML, right, you reload, it's the same object model. Notice that it closed it for us, right? Even though the source is that the H1 was, it was, oh wait, reload. There it is. It wasn't closed. The source never closed it, right? But the object representation, its interpretation, right, of having parsed it is to create this object model. Make sense? Notice that it understood it as an H1, right? So browsers are very forgiving, right? And they make a best guess on what it is that you're trying to say, right? Anyways, this is the object representation, and this is what JavaScript and jQuery are going to target. Right? We want to dynamically manipulate this object model, right? We want to, clone or add content or remove content, hide content, do all sorts of things and manipulate the UI. This is a UI. Make sense? All right. All right. So we can write to the console. We can write. Obviously, we can write C. We can just say console log C is equal to C. Say refresh, and in the console we have console. We can see C is 357. Okay, right? You can also use this console to step through the code, right? So for instance, you can put breakpoints here, right? So that if this reloads, notice that the breakpoint over here is that you have A, B, and now it's breaking on C. C has not been evaluated just yet. You can have you can look at variables. You can put watch expressions, right? So I want to see the variable A, the variable B. Notice that C is declared, but is not evaluated yet, so it's undefined, right? I can step through it. As I step through it, now it's 357. Now it's about to print console, right? So I can step through this. I can. So this is a good debugging tool, right? If you have JavaScript in a file, you can put breakpoints and watch expressions. So it's a nice development tool. You can step through it line by line. You can look at the console as this. Let me see. Console. Where's the console? Console hasn't displayed anything yet, right? And isn't the console somewhere here? I thought the console was somewhere here, so I can see what I'm doing. Console. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. So C357. Okay. All right. So that's well and good. But this is considered to be bad practice of declaring the script right inside of the HTML. Okay. Usually, what we do instead is that we declare elsewhere, right, and we load it in, right, just like style. The style tag. Right? Remember, I don't want to see any style tags in your HTML, right? Maybe for educational purposes, perhaps, but I don't want to see any style tags. You need to create your link tags that link to the CSS. Same thing here. I don't want to see script tag in your HTML, right? Instead, what we're going to do instead is that we're going to grab this. I'm going to make a copy of this. So I'm going to call 001 link. So script source. So script source, instead of declaring the script in here, call this script source. Right. Instead of declaring it here, we're going to remove the code from here. We'll remove it, and we're going to put it in a separate file. And let's see, add a new JavaScript. I'll call it 001-script-source.js. Right, the same name as the HTML, and I'm going to paste the content here. Okay. And in the script tag, I'm going to copy the source. I'm going to say src, 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 and I'm going to paste the JS file in here. right? It's going to load it, right, instead, right, as opposed to having hard-coded. And this is the way I want to see it in all your HTMLs. Please, I do not want to see the script tag and content in there, okay? Instead, link it outside. Put it outside. Make sense? All right. All right, so let me run that. If I run it and if I look at the content and I look at the console, it displays the same exact thing, right? It's as if I would have embedded it, right? But instead, it's linking it. Everybody okay? All right. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. So let's start bringing our jQuery in here. Obviously, in here you can have let's have maybe one more. So let's stop this. Let's have 002 dash functions. You can have functions. So 002, I'm gonna put it functions. This is functions. I'll put it in 002 JavaScript. I'll create a new one, a separate one. Add a JavaScript. I'll call it 002. And anything that you put in a function, f, or add a, b, you can return a plus b, right? Everything you would expect that you could do in a regular programming language, you could do here, right? You can declare functions such as add. If I declare the function, this doesn't do anything unless I call it, right? So for instance, when I run a second function, nothing really happens, right? If I look at the inspect elements, notice that the console doesn't have anything, right? Here's a console, there's nothing there, right? Unless it does declare the function, but unless I call it, it doesn't do anything, right? So in 002, I can call it, I can say add a comma b, right? And maybe declare it inside of C, right? And then I can print C, right? I can say console log C. See, and let's give values to this, right? So 12 and 23. Now, if I run it, it calls that function, and then it returns value and it evaluates. Everybody okay? Right. So pretty much anything you can think of is available in a JavaScript language, right? All right. So let's bring jQuery. Let's bring in jQuery. So jQuery, as we said, is jQuery.com. Right, jQuery, as I was saying, is going to provide an API that abstracts the browser, right? So instead of using the native API that the browser understands, we will use jQuery's API, right? We can either download it or link to jQuery. If you go to download it here, it gives you a couple of options where you could actually download, and it's an actual file you can download, right? It has two main versions, 1x and 2x. 1x still supports older browsers like IE8 and older browsers, whereas jQuery 2x has been optimized and no longer supports older browsers, right? So it depends on your project, right? If you still want to support older browsers, you need to go with a 1x version. The same features are there. There are some things that are supported in 2x that are not supported in older browsers, so you're out of luck. So it depends, right? If you know you're going to be targeting single page applications, things that use HTML5 only behavior, and you know that your audience is not going to be older than, I don't know, IE9 and whatnot, then 2x is fine, right? All right, okay, it doesn't support 6, 7, or 8, right? So IE9 and above, right? But if you're still considering supporting those browsers, then you're going to go with 1x. Okay, so you can either download it and copy it on your file. Same applies with Bootstrap, right? That we talked about last week. If you're going to be developing and you're not going to have always network connection, so it's a good idea to always have a copy of this downloaded. But in production, you don't want to have copies of these, people, your audience downloading from your server these JavaScript frameworks. Instead, you want to link it to a CDN, right? To some code repository, right? So that's what we're going to do. Down here, we have the CDN, right, to download the jQuery and download it and have the latest version right on our page, right? So let's create here an experiment that downloads jQuery. So I'm going to copy this, and I'll call this 003 jQuery. Okay. And I'm going to paste here. Oops, not that. I'm going to copy this. There it is. So it's going to download jQuery, and I'm going to run that. And network, wait, what? There it is. So downloaded jQuery. If you open it up, notice that it's a minified document. It's a right. You can't make heads or tails out of it, right? It's all unnecessary white spaces have been removed, right? So that to minimize the amount of time that it takes to download these things. But in all likelihood, your audience will have visited other sites that also use jQuery, right? That will have already downloaded this version of jQuery in all likelihood. So they're not going to download it again, right? The browser is going to check to see, oh, I already have this file. I'm not going to re-download it, right? So it's actually faster. Even though you're linking to another server that is not your own, right? It will actually be faster for you in all likelihood, right? Not necessarily, right? Anyway, so we downloaded. We're gonna give it another name here. So jQuery. Okay, so what do we do with jQuery? Let's see. So one of the things, the only real thing that jQuery does is declares a single function. It declares a single function. Let's load a script of ours, right, where we're going to be playing with jQuery. Okay, we're going to say source. Let's call this 003.js. Okay, let's create that 003.js and JavaScript. I'll call it 003. Okay, so in here we're going to just say console log playing with jQuery. Right. So we're gonna reload that, and in our console, we should see playing with jQuery, right? So the only thing that jQuery does, right, albeit very powerful thing that it does, it declares a function. The function is called jQuery, right? So we can say console.log jQuery. That's the name of the function that library declares, right? So if I refresh, notice that indeed I have just printed the function. The function takes two arguments, a comma b, right? And it does a whole bunch of things. We don't know, right? It's minified. It's a very, very powerful function, right? One of the things that it does is that it can manipulate the DOM for us, right? Instead of us doing it through the browser's native API, we can use it through the jQuery API, right? Which is much more powerful and cross-browser compatible, right? Okay. So one of the things we need to consider when we're using jQuery is that notice where the library is being loaded, okay? And notice where our code is being loaded. You see that? The rest of the document has not yet downloaded. right? So the browser doesn't yet have a document object model, right? It doesn't know anything about this h1 element yet, right? Because it's busy, downloading this stuff. Right? It has not parsed the document, right, yet to have an object model. So my code, right, it's kind of like, I can't manipulate the DOM because the DOM is not there yet. Make sense? So what many people do is that they put their code down here for two reasons. One of them is that now I'm guaranteed that at least h1 has been parsed, right? And it's in the object model. Yes? So I can start manipulating if I have paragraphs and whatnot. They have already been parsed. I have an object model to actually manipulate. I can do something. The second reason is that my application might be a little bit too big, right? It might take a couple milliseconds to download, right? And we know how users are finicky about how long things take to download, right? Half a millisecond might be too long, right? So we might want to show H1 and some marketing blurb, right, for the users to read before, right, we download any of this heavy application JavaScript. Okay, so two reasons. So we can put it here. And what could we do? Let's see. Well, one of the things that jQuery could do, right, is grab a hold of things in the DOM. Okay, like for instance, you can pass it tag names. You can pass it tag name, right? And as the name suggests, query, right? This is a query. It's like you're querying some object model, right? If this were SQL, right, this would be select all h1 from some object model, some table, right? Here we're selecting all h1 elements, right? Where in the document model, right? From the object, from the DOM, right? Select all h1. It's a query. Now that I have it, this represents an object representation of h1. I can do all sorts of things with it. I can remove it. It's gone. It's poof. I have programmatically removed the h1 from the DOM. Right? It was there. It's no longer there. Right? If I go to my elements and I refresh, you'll notice that h1 is not there. Right? It was there. Right? It actually blinked for a second. It was there. Once our code executed, poof, it removed it from the DOM. Right? Notice that it's still in the source. Right? When we download it, it was there. Yeah, it did download, right? H1 was there. So it was parsed. It was the browser briefly put it in the object model, but then jQuery programmatically removed it. Make sense? Right? Okay. Right. So notice what I'm doing, right? So this works. Why? It works because it's executing after H1 is parsed. So that means that it made it into the DOM, right? And then I programmatically removed it from the DOM, right? But more typically, these over here live way up here, right? That's more typical, right? That this code lives in the head tag, right? If I put it there, right, and I refresh, notice that it does not work, right? Because it was looking for H1, but H1 was not there, right? It didn't find it, right? Because the DOM has not yet loaded. It looked for it. H1 was not in the object model. It returned, right? Then H1 was added, right? And that's what we're looking at. Make sense? So we need a mechanism for jQuery to kind of know or wait at least until the entire document has loaded, right? We need to like listen for an event, right? Saying that, hey, the object model has been completely loaded. Now go ahead and do whatever you want. Make sense? Right? So what that technique, well, actually, let me leave this here first. I'll start a new, I'll just copy this. I'll do it in a separate environment. So I'll say So let's see, init, right? So we want kind of like an init function that starts our progress, starts our program, but after the document, after the document model has loaded, right? So we need like kind of like an initialization here, okay? So here's 4, and this is going to be 4 here. This is 4, and so this is init, and we're going to copy this to 4. This is going to be 4, 0, 4. Okay, there it is. So what we want to be able to do here is that we take this away, we take that away. This won't work, right? This won't work, right? Because we're loading it here, right? We're loading it here, and so it won't be able to remove it or do anything with it. Okay, so let me make sure that this does not work. Init 4, init h1 4. Oops. What is it running? What am I running? Oh, sorry. That's what I want to run. Okay, so there it is. So what we want to do is have us notify when the document has loaded, right? So what we're going to do here is that instead of doing this, right, we're going to say, hey jQuery, here's a function I'm going to give you. Okay, and here is where I want things to happen. Hello from jQuery. Okay, so this function, jQuery function, is a very powerful function. It's a very smart function, right? If you give it a string, right, it understands it as a selector, right? Something that selects from the object model, from the document object model, right? If you give it a function, then it understands it as an event handler, right? An event handler to be invoked when the document has completed loading, right? So what this does is says, hey jQuery, when wait for the document to load, right? What happens is that jQuery is going to register an event handler in the object model, right? With a browser, right? With the native browser API, yes. And the browser is going to notify jQuery. Right? It's gonna fire an event when the object model has completed loading. Right? So jQuery is going to be notified and going to say, the object model has completed loading. It is time to invoke whatever function you gave me. Right? It doesn't have to be called init. It could be called anything you want. Right? Okay. And once it has been initialized, then this function gets called. And here's where you can do whatever you want with jQuery, with the object model, with the object document model. Make sense? Right? So if we run this and we reload and we go to the console, right? We reload. There it is. Hello from jQuery. So that init function is being invoked. Okay. Anybody disturbed by passing a function to as a parameter? Anybody? Is anybody bothered by this? Right? JavaScript treats functions just like any other variable. Right? Here we're declaring, instead of a variable, we're declaring a function. Yes? And in JavaScript, functions are in the same power as variables. You can pass them around like arguments. Okay? Right? And just like variables can be manipulated, functions can be manipulated. Right? One of the things that you can do with functions that you can't do with variables is that they can be invoked. Right? And that's what this is what jQuery is doing. You're passing in a function and it invokes it. Everybody okay? All right. Now, one thing that you will notice in the documentation in jQuery is that they use a lot of what I call anonymous functions that don't have a name. Okay, over here, this function is not anonymous, right? It has the name init, yes? But we can make it anonymous and pass it along to jQuery, just like this. Notice the parentheses. Here are the parentheses. What are we passing to jQuery? We're passing this function that has no name. You see that? Very much like a lambda calculus, right? It's lambda, right? We're passing some function, right, that has no name, right? And it's being evaluated, right? So what's jQuery going to do with this? It's going to wait until the event handler, and then it will invoke this function. But this function has no name, right? Meaning it can only, its only scope is inside of this function call, right? It is not meant to be a reusable function. It's a throwaway function. Okay, right? One other reason, if you're not already familiar with this syntax, you should become very familiar with the syntax. It's all over the place. Okay, of passing anonymous functions backwards and forwards everywhere. Okay, it might be a little hard of a syntax to pass by, but play around with it. It's just a function, right, being passed as an argument, right, and it will be invoked eventually, right, whenever this outer function decides to invoke that function. Make sense? All right. What else? Let's see. So this works exactly the same way. So if I refresh, it does exactly the same thing. Okay. All right, but now that the document is guaranteed to be loaded, I can now use jQuery. I can use jQuery to grab a hold of H1 and remove it. Now it works, right? No matter where I put this. Notice that I put it before, but it works because it's executing after, right, the document loads. Make sense? All right. All right. Another thing is that we are, as computer scientists, we're very lazy. 6 characters to type 6 characters. It takes too long to type 6 characters, especially with one of them being a capital Q. So what jQuery does is that it abbreviates this with the $, right? It uses the $sign as an alias for the jQuery function, right? And in JavaScript, $sign is a perfectly good name for a function. Okay, you can use other names such as underscore, right? That's also a perfectly good name, right? And actually, there's an underscore library, framework, right, that uses the underscore as its alias. Okay. So anyway, if I load this, notice that it still works. It still works. But let's not remove it. Let's not remove it. Let's do other things, right? So let's see. What can we do? We can still grab it. And notice that this is what? It's called a selector. Right? What does that selector look like? It looks very much like those CSS selectors we looked at last week. Remember that? Right? Where we can use CSS, right, to refer to the document model, right? We can refer to them. We can say H1, or we can use classes. We can use IDs, right, to refer to the object model, right, and then apply styles. Yes? Well, jQuery uses the same selection mechanism that CSS3 uses. This is to refer to different parts of the document. Make sense? Right? So if you have several H1s, right? If you have several H1s, right? So we have 1, 2, 3. Refresh. There they are, right? In here. Right, if I do this, right, this applies to all H1s. It applies to all H1s, right? That means that if I run it, it removes all H1s. Okay. Well, let's not remove all H1s. Let's do something else. Let's paint it. Let's change the style. Actually, no. Let's do it in a separate document. Let's copy this. This is 005 CSS. This is 005. So in here, let's have several things. Let's have some paragraphs in here. Okay. Let's have a paragraph P, and let's grab something here from lorem ipsum. Just grab that, whatever. And let's run that. Let's run this. Oh, and remove the H1, right? Remove the H1. Let's not do that. Let's go to H5, which is this one, right? And let's not remove. Let's remove this, and let's change the style, right? We'll say CSS, and we'll say I want to change the color to red. There it is. So init, right? Actually, let's change the name of it. So CSS. There it is. So I can change the style programmatically, right? Instead of doing it declaratively like I did with plain old CSS files, I can do it now programmatically, right? I can calculate. I can decide. There could be if statements, while loops, for loops. I can access databases, and depending on database, I can decide to do things programmatically. Make sense? I can maybe not only do CSS like this, I can also do I can chain together, right? What happens here is that when I do this, right, each function call to the jQuery function returns a jQuery object, right? So this returns an H1 in steroids, right? So here's just a plain old element. The plain old element did not have a CSS function, okay? But by calling it through jQuery, it returns an object that has a lot of API attached to it. One of them is a CSS function. Another one is a remove function, like we saw earlier, okay? And this allows us to manipulate, to interact with the DOM model, with the DOM, without going through the browser's native API. I mean, we could do all this with the native browser's API, right? But we might need to decide to do it one way for Safari, one way for IE. Instead, this takes care of checking for all that, right? So each time I want to do this, it returns a jQuery object, which I can then apply another function to it. I can keep adding more functions calling. We can chain these together. Right, I want to change the color, the background color to yellow. Okay, there it is. So I am programmatically changing the background and the foreground color, right? So the CSS function is very, very, very smart. It can take two arguments, of which the first one is an attribute, right? A property that can be changed. And the other one is the value of that attribute that I want to change, the CSS attribute. Make sense? Typically, when you're chaining these together, a very common syntax in jQuery is to have them in separate lines like this. Okay, and that's the way I want to see it in your code. I don't want you long lines of invocations, right? This makes it much easier to read. Yes. All right, this does exactly the same thing. Notice that the semicolon is at the last one. This one does not have a semicolon. You've got a syntax error. Okay, everybody okay? Right. Another way of CSS is many of these functions are smart enough to take different types of arguments. Although there is no overloading in JavaScript, there is no overloading, right? Although what I'm about to do looks like overloading, it's not really overloading, right? I am going to pass something else here, something like that. I'm going to pass an object literal, right? And it says, oh, okay, so there's two versions of CSS, right? One that takes two string arguments and one that takes an object argument. No, actually, the CSS function is just smart enough to look at the data type of the first argument. If it's a string argument, it says, oh, that means that the second argument must be also string, right? If instead it's an object data type, then it does something completely different, right? So yes, you can almost have something like overloading, right? but it's not the overloading we know of in Java or C#, right? You implement it in some weird way, right? Anyway, so the CSS, you can provide an object little with curly brackets where you can give it properties, right? Like we had earlier. Oh, why did I remove the whole thing? I'm going to just change here. I'm going to say open curly bracket. That's property value, comma, property value, close curly bracket. Okay. There we go. So I'm passing what it's called, what in JavaScript we call an object literal. Just like there's a string literal, right? There's a numeric literal. There's an object literal, right? What are objects? Objects are what? Are instances of classes, right? As we know in other programming languages. What are classes? A collection of attributes, right? Or properties, collection of properties, yes? What is an object? Is an instance of a class, yes? That means that you have the same properties, but those properties actually have values, correct? So that's what an object literal is property value, yes? So that's what an object is in JavaScript. We call this a JSON notation. It's a JavaScript object notation, right? Which is just a curly bracket with name value pairs separated by commas. You heard okay? And CSS the CSS function is smart enough to accept either string or an object that has property value. Everybody okay? All right, so if I save this and I go back and I refresh, it does exactly the same thing. Just to prove this, if I change this to green, it changes to green, this red. There we go. So it is working, right? It does work. It works exactly the same way. Everybody okay? Everybody still with me? You lost anybody? All right. All right, so CSS. We've played around with CSS enough. 12:47. So we go till 1:25, right? Okay, so I have plenty of time. All right. We can not only grab the H1, we can grab a paragraph as well, right? We can grab the paragraph. P CSS color blue. We can change. Notice that I changed the blue color of the paragraph. If I have two paragraphs, it applies to both paragraphs. So, right, if I load it, there it is. They're both blue. But typically, I might want to be more specific, right? I might want to be more specific. I might want to say that I want to target only the paragraph, the second paragraph, right? The one that has an ID of second, right? So that means that notice that now if I run it, it didn't find any paragraph whose ID is second. So notice that it doesn't apply to anybody, right? But if I apply here the ID equals second, right? Notice that now I'm targeting the second one down here. Make sense? Right? So this is very much like CSS3 selectors, right? This is very, very much like CSS selectors. I might declare that I wanna all paragraphs whose class is red, right? Red BG. So I want to change the CSS whose background color is red. Right? If I run this, there are no paragraphs that has a class red BG, right? So, but if I go and start painting my paragraph with that class, right? And I can say class red BG, now it applies and it paints that one paragraph. Make sense? So any paragraph that I paint with that class, right, it applies. There it is. So we have two paragraphs and they're being painted like that. Make sense? Right? So it makes sense, right? That you can use if you can write a CSS rule, the same CSS rule you can apply here. Okay. You can also be more specific. You can say, maybe you can have in this paragraph, you might have here span, right? Right, you can say maybe white BG, white background. Okay. Right now it doesn't do anything, right? So lorem ipsum, nothing has happened to lorem ipsum, but I could, right? I can say, grab anything instead. So I could say span dot white BG, yes, right? And then say CSS color white or background color white, and that will target only that lorem ipsum, right? But what if I want to apply it? I just want to apply it maybe to this H1, right? I would love to just apply it to this H1 as well. I want that background to be white. Actually, I think I'm already changing the color there, right? Let's apply it to this new class here, to this new paragraph, right? There it is. It applied it. Oh wait, no, not white. Let's do blue. It's already white, right? Makes no sense. So blue background. So this is blue background, and this is blue, right? And this span is blue. So there it is. So it's painting the span. It is not painting the paragraph, even though it has the same class. Yes, right? So I can be less specific. I can say, you know what? I don't really care if it's a span, right? I just want anything that has the class blue background, right? Anything that has the blue background, change its background to blue, right? So I can say, did I save it? No, I didn't save it. So now that there it is, right? So anything now that it has that class, I'm applying that rule. Make sense? So this was just just going over some of how to do selectors in jQuery, right? So let's do something more interesting. One of the things we're going to want to do is we want to dynamically manipulate the DOM, right? So one of the things that we want to do is add things to the DOM, or remove things from the. Well, we already saw how to remove things from the DOM, right? We already saw how to do that. Let's oops, remove that. Stop that. Remove that. And here is, say, append. Append and remove. We already saw remove, right? We already saw remove. But let's give it name 6. And this will be 6. And this is 6. And this is append and remove. And this is, let's run that. I'm in the right place, right? Yes. All right, so this is 6, and it loads this 6 over here, 6.js. What does it do? It just removes H1. Let's. All right, so yeah, so we already looked at something that we can remove, right? So there it is. We can remove content. We can remove a particular. Element that has, a paragraph whose ID is second. So right now we have how many? We have 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, right? 3 paragraphs. If we reload this, notice that I only have 2 paragraphs now, right? I only have 2 paragraphs. Why? Because one of them has been removed. I can append stuff, right? I can append. Who can appending means add content. Yes, and we have when you're adding content, you need to be able to say, well, who are you adding content to? Right? Who are you adding content to? Let's see. We can add content to what? We can add content to the H1. We can add content to this paragraph. We can add content to the body. What do we want to add content to? Let's see. We can add content to the. Let's try adding to the paragraph. Okay. So let's see. Grab the paragraph. Grab the paragraph, and I'm going to append. Right. Add this content. So this is going to say new content. Right. And right. If I refresh, notice there's the new content. And notice that it has been added to both paragraphs. You see that? Meaning everything that matches, I will apply this. You know, there's this kind of like an iteration here, right? That we get for granted, for free. Right? It's not like, you know, grab all of them, iterate over all each one, and then append to each one. No, it's very, very powerful, right? It's modifying everything that matches, right? We can not only can we append, we can change the content. We can change content that is already there, like for instance, append and remove, right? We can change that. So let's grab the H1. We can grab that H1. I want to change the HTML content of that element, right? I want to say I want to say append, remove, and change content, right? So I want to say append, remove, and change content. Right. So I'm going to do it. So now I have programmatically manipulated the content of the H1. Right. Right. I've changed the content dynamically, programmatically. Right. What else could I do? I can add content to the body. Right. I can say grab the body, and this is brand new content that I'm going to add. Right. I can create a brand new node on the fly. I can create a new paragraph. Right. And say this is a new paragraph. My brand new HTML content, and just append it to who? To the body. Right? So if I refresh, somewhere down here, there it is. That's the paragraph that goes there. I can add it to the beginning or to the end. Append adds it to the bottom, to the end. Right? I can prepend. I can say add it to the beginning, prepend. Right? So this is the beginning of the body, right? So notice that it used to have the H1 used to be the first element in the body, yes? But I am prepending, meaning I am adding at the beginning of the body. So this is going to be the new node element at the beginning of the body, right? So if I look at the DOM, notice where the P ended up being. See that at the beginning, right at the beginning of the body. Notice that it does not match the content that we downloaded, right? In the content that we downloaded, H1's still there, right? That's what got downloaded, what got parsed, but then we manipulated the DOM, right, on the fly. You see that? Everybody okay? Right? All right. So instead of adding content and creating elements like this, more typically, we can create variables, right? Variables, new paragraph. I can say new paragraph. New paragraph key. Right? And then I can add it to the body and say grab the body and prepend new paragraph. And so I can either have a variable, right, or I can have a literal like this. So this could be calculated, right? This could be something that I'm reading from a database, right? I'm reading dynamically from somewhere, and I'm dynamically adding this. I'm prepending it, There is the new paragraph. And the nice thing of having a variable, right? Of having a variable is that I can keep manipulating. I can keep manipulating the variable, right? I can say new paragraph. I can now change its color or something, right? I can say that the color is green. No, so there it is. It's green. Well, actually, you can't even see that, right? Let me change it to background color. There is the new paragraph I've added. So not only I've added it, but I still have access to that paragraph as an object that I can manipulate using the same API from jQuery. Everybody okay? Is everybody still with me? Have I lost anybody? Am I going too fast? Is this okay? Is the pace okay? You need me to slow down, or it should be easy, right? Everybody okay? Obviously, I'm not going to go through the entire API, jQuery API. This would take an entire semester just to talk about jQuery, right? It's very, very powerful. It's very extensive, right? And we're only going to use here and there things that we need. I would say the more interesting pieces of it, right? Ajax and manipulating DOM and things like that. But as we need more things, we will introduce more features of jQuery as we need them. Today is just a brief introduction of what can you do with jQuery, right? On Friday we'll talk about how do we maybe use Ajax, right, to extract data from some service, right, and then dynamically render our content. Okay, all right. So we know how to do that. Let's instead of having these pieces of text, right, being hard coded. Right now, all these pieces of text are hard coded. Yes. These are literal strings, yes? More typically, this is data that is coming to us as some kind of object representation. Okay? And then we programmatically map that object representation to the front end. Right? There has to be some kind of binding between the front end, some kind of naming convention in the front end, and some naming convention, an object model representation in the middle tier over here. Notice that our middle tier now is the browser, right? Middle tier used to be, well, it still is, lives on the server, right? But now we have this a lot of that middle tier is moving its way towards the front end, right? And same issues, some of the same design issues that we face in middle tier development, right, are same issues that we need to apply here as well, and that will become apparent and very, very formal when we talk about single page applications. Okay. Nevertheless, let's start playing around with that idea. So let's copy this. Well, let's stop that. Let's have 007. Okay. Render variables. Okay. That's the most trivial example of an object, right? It's just a variable, right? So let's have a separate JavaScript here. This will be 007. And so in here we're going to have 007. There we go. And so, for instance, what we want to do, right, is have a mapping, right, of some representation in the UI, right, and that we can map to some representation in our algorithm, right? Our algorithms right now is jQuery, right? We want to programmatically manipulate the UI from some object representation. Right now, the only object representation that we have is in JavaScript, right? Eventually, that object representation will come from the server, right? From some database or from some web API out there. Right now, it's going to be hard coded in our JavaScript here. Let me close this and close all these. Oh wait, We close all but this. There we go. 7, there it is. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to start naming things. We're going to name things in the front end, right? Like for instance, ID. Call this the main title. Main title. And the naming convention that we're going to follow is that the same naming the same names that we use in the front end. We're going to try and copy that same naming convention in the, well, not back end, but in the JavaScript object model. Right, so that we know that one thing is mapping to something else, right? So this is our most simplest of examples, right? Where we have just a plain old variable, right? Main var main title, and this is a dynamic title, right? And what do? We grab, that's easy, right? We just grab ID main title, and we set the HTML to the content of the variable. Right, that's trivial. Right, what's that going to do? It's going to replace the content of that H1 with this content. Yes. Now, right now, this main title is hard coded to be a string. Yes, to have that value. Eventually, this is going to be coming from the server, right? From some database, from some query. But right now, it's hard coded. Okay, so I run this, and obviously, it doesn't work. Oh, it's this one, right? There it is. This is the dynamic title coming from a variable, right? So let's make something be a little bit more complicated. Not just a variable, but maybe an array of variables, right? That'll make it a little more interesting. Okay, so instead of just a variable, we'll say an array of variables, right? So we'll say that this is 08 render variables, render, I'll just say arrays, and we'll copy this, and this will be 8 arrays. There we go. Right. So now we might have here we already have the main title, but we might have let's see, genres, right? So these are genres for movie genres, okay? And we might have something like var genres, right? And an array that says, you know, horror. We might have a comedy. We might have what else? Drama. Okay, let's just have that. Just an array of strings. And what we might want to do is render that. Notice that the original content that was there, append and remove, was removed, right? We replaced that content with dynamically with our variable, yes? And now the content there might have already been there by the web designer, right? Where the web designer might have added actual content to see how it rendered, right? To see that it looked pretty, that it was professional, whatnot. But not until it got to us, the developers, we actually filled it in with real data, right? So the web designer might have used, you know, dummy data here, dummy text like lorem ipsum, right? But then the actual data is being injected programmatically by us. Okay, so let's render here the genres, and the genre we might want to use a UL, right, an unordered list to render the genres, right? So we'll call this ID genre, right? And presumably in here we want to dynamically add content in here. Okay, so we're going to come here and it says, okay, let me grab that UL. Let me grab it. Var, here's the UL. It's the UL with the ID genres. Have it. Right. I might actually fill it in with dummy content, right, just to see that it renders correctly. Right, whatever content. 8. Wait a minute. Let me run 8. Yeah, so there's dummy content in there, right? And as a web designer, I might fill it in with dummy content just to make sure that everything, it fits in, right? It has the right sizing, the right height, the right whatever, right? But not until the developer comes in, they are going to feed and bind this to real data from a database. Right now, we don't have a database. On Friday, we will. So anyway, the first thing we're going to do is, as a developer, we're going to empty it. We're going to say, whatever the designer added, I don't care. I'm just going to throw it away, right? That's the first thing I'm going to do. Wait, empty ul genre. Is that what it's called? ul id genres. Yeah, empty. What am I missing? Oh, thank you. Yes. You know what would have been scary? If this would have actually worked. Okay, so let's refresh. There it is. I emptied it, right? So I don't care what you have there. I'm just going to feed it in with real data. What I'm going to do is programmatically, I'm going to iterate over the array. Right? I'm just going to say for var I in genres. Okay, I'm iterating. What do you expect I to be? If this were Java or C#, the I would be horror, comedy, drama, correct? Right, but not in JavaScript, right? The I is just 0, 1, and 2, right? The I is an index, right? If I say console log I, and I inspect and look at the console, it just prints 0, 1, and 2, right? If you really want the values, you need to use the index to dereference, right? So if I want the values, it will be genre sub I, right? Genre sub I, and that displays the syntax. Okay, all right. So what we're gonna do is as we're iterating, we need to create several LIs, right? And we know how to do that, right? We're gonna create an LI for every single one of these, right? We did that already, didn't we? We created a dynamic paragraph before, didn't we? Right? And in there, we're gonna append genre sub I. That's the content of the LI, isn't it? Right? And then we're gonna close it. We're gonna close it with the closing LI. Here we go. What are we gonna do with the LI? We're gonna append it to the UL. Right? We're gonna say ul.append that LI. Okay. Notice that we're doing this by hand, right? It's very tedious. Okay. Next week, when we look at Angular JS, we'll see that it'll be just one line of code, right? Borrowed straight from ASPX or from JSPs, right? That you have a collection, right? And you want to map that collection to some content, to some components, right? In ASPX, it's very easy, right? You have an iterator, right? A data iterator, and then it iterates over a collection, right? And it maps everything. Right now, we're doing it by hand, and that's okay. At least we know what Angular might be doing behind the scenes, right? Okay. So there it is. It appends. Let's run this. There it is. Horror, comedy, and drama. See that? So that's an array. That's an array. What about an object? What about an object? So let's do an object. Let's do an object. So let's copy this. So this is this is render object. Render object, and this is wait. Oh, sorry, 9. And this is 9. Sorry, this is 9. 9. And this really, the name of this should be render arrays. So let's render an object. So let's close that. Let's close that, and let's bring up 9. So let's create an object. Let's create a very simple object. So let's create maybe a an employee, right? So we're going to say var employee, and the employee is going to have a first name, Alice, and it's going to have a last name, Wonderland, right? And we want to render this somewhere here. So let's create a 9. Let's create a placeholder. Maybe as a span or something. Maybe we'll say span, ID, F name, and then another span for ID for a last name. Yes, and that's very easy, right? So we're going to go here. I'm going to say we're going to grab, or actually the name, the ID might be a better name for this. Might be what? Might be employee dot first name and employee dot last name. Dot last name. Okay. And over here, what we're going to do is says we're going to grab the employee. Actually, no, wait a minute. Maybe the object representation might be that this is a, maybe it's a div, right? And this is inside of the div, and the employee is here. So this is ID employee. Oops. Right, and this is F name and last name. Help me. Notice that we're trying to follow, right, the same structure of the object, right, the hierarchical object representation of the object. We're trying to follow the same representation in the UI, right? So let's see here. We're gonna grab the employee. There it is, right? So var employee. And now that we have the employee, we want to find the first name of that employee, and we want to change its HTML to be the object, right? So we're gonna say employee find first name. What this does, it says I have the DOM representation of the employee element, right? I grabbed it. There it is, right? I represent that div. Yes, right? And now that I am in that div, I can now find elements in my context, right? Elements that are inside of me that have other CSS or other element, other selectors like first name, right? So is this first name? I grabbed it. What am I going to do with it when I find it? I am going to change its HTML to be what? The object employee. The employee dot FName. All right, let's try that. That didn't work. Sorry, it's. Oh, let me run that. 9. It's this one. That didn't work. What's going on? I'm sorry? That still didn't work. Am I looking at 9? Render object. Excuse me. Let's see if I grabbed it. Did I grab it? Let me see. We put this in a variable. Let me console log employee. Let me see if it found it. And let me go to console. Refresh. Okay, so it found the div. There it is, right? That's the div. So it found the div. And what about the first name? Var F name. Let me see if it found it. I'm going to do console log F name. Okay, so I found F name. So it did find it. It did find it. So why is it not changing the HTML? F name dot. Oh, I'm overriding the object. Employee OBJ. How's that? Actually, no. This will be employee DOM, right? To distinguish it from the object. That's the DOM, right? There we go. Try again. There it is. There's Alice, right? And I can grab the last name. I can grab the last name, and then set the last name with employee last name. There it is. So I have programmatically manipulated it, right? What about an array of objects, right? More typically, we get, when we go to query the database, right, we're going to get a subset of some table, right, represented as an array of objects, right, where each where the array represents all the records, right, that meet some query, and each object in that array represents a row in the result set. Yes, right. So typically we'll get something like let me create another experiment, and I'm going to call this 010 render array objects, right? And then this is 10, so this is 010, right? And don't let me do the same error, right? Okay, this is 10, right? All right. And here's 10. All right, so instead of employee, I might have an array of employees, right? So I might have something like var employees, which is going to be an array of objects, right? So here's first name. So we have Bob, L name, Dylan, right? And I might have lots of these, right? So I might have several of these, right? And this will be maybe Charlie, Garcia, and Aykroyd, Edward Norton. Right, so I have an array of employees, yes, and presumably I might want to render it as a table. How's that? Let's render as a table. So I have table here, and I'll call this ID employees. Right, and I'm going to leave it empty. And instead here, I am going to grab that employees from the DOM. Right, I'm going to say var employees DOM. So grab employees, right? I'm gonna if it has any content, I'm gonna empty it out. Employees DOM.empty, empty. And then I'm going to iterate over in employees, right? J in employees, and so each object E is the employee is going to be employees sub J, right? What am I doing for each one? I'm creating a table row, right? For each one. So let me create a table row. I'll say table row. TR, and then I'm going to create a table data for each one of the elements, right? The first name, the last name, or whatnot, right? So I'm going to say I'm going to create a table data, a new table data, and I'm going to append to. I'm going to put inside of that table data. What am I going to put in there? I'm going to put the employee's first name, right? And then that table data, I'm going to append it to the table row dot append the table data. I'm going to create another table data for what? I'm going to create a brand new table data element to which I am going to append the last name, right? I'm going to append e dot last name And I'm going to append that table data to the row. tr append the table data. And finally have the table row, I append it to the table itself, right? So I have table.append the table row, the entire row, right? Oops. Right? Oops. Nope, that's not it. 10, that one. Run that. And that didn't work. Let's see. What is it complaining about? Caught. What did I do? Table is not defined. Table is not defined. Table var. Employees DOM. Oh, that's the table. I'm sorry. Right? It's this one, right? Not the table. That work? 10. Didn't complain that time. That's the employees. The employees, what is the employees? The employees is this one. Employees. Employee, I empty it. Var, employee, blah, blah, blah. Let's step through this. Oh, we're out of time, aren't we? I'm sorry? What do you mean? Closing the tag? You shouldn't have to. For employees. Oh, hash. I hate computers. There they are. There's Bob Dylan, Charlie, Dan, and whatnot. See that? All right. So we saw today how to use JavaScript, jQuery to dynamically manipulate the DOM. Right? Obviously, I mean, even though you can do this, it's better to go through a framework that does this for you. And for that, we're going to be using AngularJS next week. For now, we're going to stick to doing it by hand. Right? Whenever you need to manipulate DOM by hand, then there it is. Okay. All right, let's leave it here. I'm going to start making all this code available in GitHub, right? And you should be doing the same too, right? All your things should now live in GitHub. I will share my things in GitHub. I will record it, and I'll put the video online so that you'll see how to do it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes.
My name got added to the courses yesterday.
Yep.
But it's not there on Professor Masala's website. Like,
oh, okay.
List of students.
Yeah. So send me and him, because I can't do that. He has to do that. So send him an email. CC me. He will verify with me that you are indeed in the course, and then he will add you.
Okay. And about the experiments, like, is there a deadline by when I need to complete?
5 experiments per week, except the first week. So we are into our fourth week. So by the end of this week, there should be 15 experiments.
By the end of this week?
Yes. So by last week, there were 10 experiments. By the end of this week, there'll be 15.
My laptop crashed yesterday, actually.
I'm sorry?
My laptop crashed and
Oh, no.
I've given it for
Okay.
So,
All right. We'll be understanding. All right, buddy. Hurry up.
yeah.
The grading of the experiments, will it be briefing or will it be graded?
Yeah, so the way it's gonna be notified is that you will be notified through GitHub. So create a GitHub account, put everything there in GitHub, and the TAs every week will look at the last experiments you worked on through GitHub, and will notify you if there's something wrong. They will open an issue on GitHub, and you have to close that issue.
Okay. So over the grading and all, like
Yeah, so experiments are 40%, the project is 40%, and the main page is 20%.
I gave it on Monday, but for the first week it got delayed by 2 days. I don't know whether the years again review or the first week.
Yes, they every week they go and they review everything and said, we sent you emails last time. We told you to do this, blah 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 blah. Like we see that you haven't yet done it, blah blah blah. But this will be much easier to keep track of through GitHub.
Okay.
Through an issue. Okay. Okay. No. Yes.
How does it happen?
Yeah, I just switched.
Yeah.
Hi, Charles. Nice to meet you.
So the browser, when it loads, it has an object called document, and the document you can register an event handler for the document to notify you when it loads, right? And so you give it a function, and the document is and that way the browser will invoke the function, and so that's what jQuery is doing. jQuery is using the document. So dot register event handler blah 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 to call your function, the function which you can invoke. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Right? So yes, right. So then we need to assign you a TA. Right, exactly. So when you send me that email, I will forward it to the TA and say these are new students, decide who wants to do this. Okay, good luck.